Good morning and welcome to the Lightcast monthly live analysis of the JOLTS. JOLTS stands for Job Openings Labor Turnover Survey, a U.S. Labor Department report we release every month to give us a glimpse of what is happening in our labor market. On this, August 30th, 2022, I'm your host, Christopher Laney, and I am broadcasting from the Southeastern Training Association, also known as SETA. And I am joined by two of our leading economists, senior labor economist Elizabeth Crowfoot and senior labor economist Layla O'Kane. Elizabeth, Layla, welcome to the conversation.
Good morning,
Hi,
Chris. Sounds like you're having a good
Good to have
time.
you. The report just came out 30 minutes ago. Layla, I'm going to start with you. What is your first take? What do you see in this report?
Yeah, it feels a little bit like deja vu. We are not seeing a ton of changes going on. So openings are actually up a little bit relative to last month, and they were even revised up last month. So they're up again to 11.2 million job openings. And we're seeing just really little change going on overall in separations, including in the layoff rate. It's pretty much stayed the same, and in hires. So not a ton of new stuff, which is kind of surprising in and of itself.
Yeah, Elizabeth, we're going to talk a little bit about a variety of things happening within industries, but I want to touch on first and foremost what is happening in the transportation and warehousing industries, because it seems like that's where there are the most job openings, yet we're also seeing the most separations in that industry. So what is happening?
Yeah, and we're also seeing a lot of strength in retail trade, for example, and arts, entertainment, and recreation. And we've been hearing a lot about consumers shifting their spending from goods to services, especially over the summer months. But now it seems like they want a little bit of both, right? If you're planning a vacation, you want to go to a theme park, you're going to have to buy, some sunscreen or some new clothes, or if you're going to the beach, you're going to need a new bathing suit or a new towel. So seems like, especially over the summer months, there's some hot demand for other products and services. So all of that is coming together. So that's a little bit surprising as well.
So I want to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, and that is inflation. What does this report say about what is happening with inflation? Layla, I'll start with you, and then Elizabeth will come to you right after.
Yeah, great question. So, I think in July, inflation was about steady, which was good, and we're seeing decreases in inflation coming down from energy prices coming down, and I think the main thing right now that's driving inflation still is food prices, and so I know we're talking about wage inflation here, but I don't think right now we're seeing a sort of spiral where wage inflation pushes up overall inflation even more, because wages overall haven't increased as much as inflation has in other sectors of the economy. And so I think this remains to be seen. This is still obviously a really tight labor market, and that means that there could be even more pressure on wage inflation. But I personally don't think this is the time to panic.
Elizabeth, to you, any thoughts on what is happening with wage inflation, specifically coming out of this report?
Yeah, totally agree with Layla on the wage inflation aspect, but also generally just on price inflation. This isn't the direction that Jay Powell and the rest of the, Fed wants to see in terms of job openings. They really want to see an easing in the labor market to push those price pressures down, both wages and goods prices as well. So it's a tough spot to be in. We're talking about this soft landing that we're trying to hit. We really are now just aiming for the softest possible landing in terms of a possible recession coming down the pipeline. So, even Jay Powell said in his commentary last week that he's expecting that he's going to have to continue to raise rates, keep them elevated because inflation is not coming down, right? It's easing somewhat, but it's still way off that 2% target that they're shooting for. So I think there's still going to be a little bit of pain for both consumers and households, in the near future.
So, Elizabeth, do you think that this is good news or bad news from the Fed's efforts of trying to control inflation?
We're definitely in that environment where good news is bad news and bad news is good news, right? They want to see a little bit of that easing of the labor market, and that's not what we saw this month. And obviously, 1 month of data doesn't make a trend, so we want to continue to monitor the situation, but it's definitely not going in the right direction. And To be honest, that's a little bit expected over the summer months. There's still a lot of pent up demand. Like I said, there are consumers that want to go out on vacation. They want to go out to restaurants and bars and go to theme parks. So I think once the summer months are behind us, and again, this is a look in the rearview mirror. These data are lagging indicators. So as the fall approaches, I think maybe we'll see a slightly different story.
Layla, it just seems like when we're talking about job openings, it's still static. We have over 11 million job openings still. What are you looking for in this report to see if we have that potential cooling of what is happening in the labor market? Are there indicators that you're really keeping an eye on that might start to demonstrate some of that cooling?
Yeah, to be honest, I would say all of the indicators in this report are important for demonstrating that. So if we were to see a cooling, which to be clear, we're definitely not right now, I would want to see openings to come down. I would want to see hiring to come down a little bit, and I would want to see potentially layoffs to go up. And that would indicate to me that we're kind of slowing down, that there aren't as many openings that employers are continuing to look for, that they aren't able to fill with workers, and that we would be kind of getting closer together in those rates. And we're not seeing that right now.
Yeah, last month when we were together, we kind of felt that, right? Because they dropped down to 10.7 mil. And then here we are back over 11 million again.
Yeah. And they were even revised up last month. So last month was actually really around 11 mil ultimately. Yeah. So
again, looking at that indicator, I think all of us were like, oh, okay, we're dropping. And then here we are again, back over 11 million, and we don't have enough people.
I think the other thing to note on cooling is what I would really probably be paying more attention to is the unemployment rate, which you can't get from this report, but which we'll see on Friday at our jobs report, LinkedIn Live, and we'll be able to understand a little bit better. At that point, sort of as Elizabeth alluded to, this is a lagging indicator right now. We're looking at July. And so Friday will tell us more up-to-date information on the unemployment rate, which would sort of indicate what's going on currently.
So, Elizabeth, when we start to consider the situation where do you believe our economic pain doesn't necessarily mean a lot of the layoffs or a slowing of the market? Like, do you see that there's the potential of we're just not feeling it as much because of the labor market when we think about what is happening in our economy?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, when we talk about or we think about a slowdown, we really think about our own personal economies and what that means. And it's very different, right? There's a lot of variation in job openings across different industries too. So if you're in the goods producing sector, durable goods openings came down, and actually restaurants and bars openings came down as well. So if you're in those industries, you're feeling the pain a little bit more than, say, if you're working at a theme park this summer, you're seeing there's a lot of demand. So it's definitely a very varied scene right now in terms of what different sectors of the economy are seeing and feeling.
So I know that we talk about this being a lagging indicator, right? The report definitely lags. We saw that the quit rates are down a bit from the record high 3% at the end of 2021. Do you think that this is a strong indication of potentially the cooling off, or at least the people realizing maybe I just need to stick it out in my current job right now because I don't know what the economy is going to do?
It could be a couple of factors. I mean, first off, that quits rate coming down just a little bit is definitely a good sign. It means that workers may be a little bit more hesitant than before to switch jobs. Maybe they are starting to see sort of that potential looming recession coming down the pipeline, and they want to find a job and stick with it. The other thing is that we have seen almost a year now of elevated quit rates. So we're starting to see that employers and workers are starting to make better matches. So once you find a good, employment opportunity, you want to stick with it. So I assume that quits rate is going to come down, especially as we head towards the fall and as economic activity starts to slow down as well.
Layla, when we think about the predictions that we made in the research, the demographic drought, it seems like the fluctuations that are happening in our economy is not necessarily swaying the predictions that we made in that research. We still lack people. We still have tons of job openings. What is your take on whether or not we are settling into what potentially could be considered the new normal?
Oh, well, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Great question. I mean, I think we've seen that this to be the new normal in the short term, for sure, in terms of the JOLTS report. So we've seen these really high opening rates and really low separations rates overall for the last few months. I think it's probably going to start shifting. Our labor market indicators will probably start shifting a little bit. But I do think that there's some other trends that are longer term that are here to stay that are a little bit more sticky. So that's things like workers being more, having more flexibility in employment. I think employers are going to focus more on providing flexibility, providing remote work options where possible, providing some sort of better flexible benefits that have come out of this current labor market situation. I think we've been tracking a bunch of indicators of sort of what employers are willing to do to combat labor shortages. And that includes things like these flexible hours, like remote work. That includes things like on-the-job training. When they can't find workers that they need, they're going to continue to offer that training in-house. Potentially things like starting or sign-on bonuses, things like relocation fees if they do need to work in person. And I do think that those are sticky and those are going to stay around for the foreseeable future, even if we do see a sort of cooling off of these labor market indicators.
Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you, but Layla, if you have anything you want to add, feel free to add. Is there anything in this report that indicates a potential recession is coming? And I know defining a recession from a technical standpoint, some say we're already in it, but from this report specifically, are there any indicators that you feel like a recession is coming or we're in it?
Well, we're seeing that openings are still increasing. The only sign that I would say is that hiring is slowing down a little bit. And that quits rate is edging down as well. So I wouldn't call it a sign that a recession is coming. It's just, the labor market is dynamic, and especially on a month-to-month basis, it's hard to determine those trends, but demand is still strong, especially for in-person services, especially over the summer. There is a potential for things to start to cooling off later this year, but as of right now, I don't really see any, hard fact sign that there is a recession in the near term.
So, challenge is, right, the report's been out 40 minutes, the Dow's down 300 points. Like investors are kind of scared. Why do you think that they're kind of pulling back or they're a little nervous coming out of this report? To Layla or Elizabeth.
Layla
Go ahead.
So in terms of the investors, yes, they're definitely they're reacting to what's happening and their expectations of what the Fed is going to do. So obviously, I mentioned before that good news is bad news. And for them, seeing an uptick in openings, that the labor market is not cooling off, means that Jay Powell and the rest of the Fed, they're going to be much more committed to raising those interest rates, continuing to pull back to engineer some sort of slowdown, and businesses and investors are reacting to that.
Layla, any thoughts, not whether it's the last question I just asked or even before that, talking about whether or not these indications that we're looking at are driving, what's happening in the economy?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think I agree with Elizabeth. I think this report is really not showing signs of a recession. I think we should remember, I think Bloody kind of mentioned this last month when we were talking about these indicators, but a recession is people sort of hurting. And right now, at least from this report's perspective, we're not seeing the effect on individual workers, right? We're maybe seeing an effect on employers overall because they're struggling still to get all of the talent that they need, fill all of those job openings. But we're not seeing signs of layoffs being really high, which is what we would be worried about in a recession. And that's not happening.
So I want to move to our final thoughts. Elizabeth, I'll start with you. Your final takeaways in this report, if you want to give me 2 or 3 that really stick out to you.
Yeah, I mean, the first one is that, industries are really seeing differences in how the labor market is evolving over time, right? Some industries are being hit much harder than others. Healthcare, for example, saw a down shift in openings, as well as restaurants and bars. And, that's also somewhat surprising. And on the other hand, the other end of the spectrum, we did see retail trade and warehousing bump up a little bit. So there's a lot of shifting dynamics here. So that's one takeaway. The other is that there's still a lot of churn in the labor market happening. We did see the quits rate come down a little bit, but hiring is still, the hiring rate is still somewhat faster than overall separations. So there's still a lot of movement happening, especially if, when we hear about those potential layoffs happening of some companies, doing that over the summer, especially, even if those workers are losing their jobs, they're still able to find jobs relatively quickly. And then lastly, I would just say we're still in a historically tight labor market, especially with labor force participation still coming down over the last few months. Employers are still having a hard time finding the talent that they need.
Layla, to you, your final takeaways, final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have kind of been talking about, is this the soft landing that the Fed has been hoping for? And it's certainly not a hard landing, but I don't know that I would say it's a landing at all, right? I mean, I think we're just staying in this period of really high openings, really low layoffs, and we're not getting to the place where things are kind of cooling off in a slow and steady way, so as not to sort of harm the overall economy, but to make sure that we don't have that inflationary pressure. We're not there yet. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see, again, on Friday, how things are looking for unemployment, and to see sort of the Fed's reaction to this report, given that I don't think it's the landing they were hoping for.
Layla, Elizabeth, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time this morning, your live analysis. You can join us on Friday for the jobs report live analysis when it comes out. Again, broadcasting from the Southeastern Training Association, or SETA conference. I'm your host, Chris Laney, and I am so thankful that you joined us today for this analysis. Go to lightcast.o for more information.